there is a lot of interesting stuff around Oppenheimer. So there's a book by a guy named William Steinman called UFO Crash that claims that Robert Oppenheimer was on a cleanup crew, a UFO crash cleanup crew in Aztec, New Mexico, March of 1948, a year after Roswell, with Townsend Brown, among a few others. And so again, I don't know whether that's true. I'm working my way through the book right now. I think it's worthy of either corroboration or falsification. There's another book called The Fall of Robert J. Oppenheimer, or UFO Secrecy and the Fall of Robert J. Oppenheimer. It's by an Air Force guy, a guy named Donald Burleson. And he makes the very interesting claim that maybe the stripping of the Q clearance in Oppenheimer's case had more to do with his UFO knowledge than actually, his schmoozing with, Soviet spies in the 30s or whatever.
Christopher Nolan is wrong. Yeah, it's disinformation from Nolan.
Maybe. I have a very prominent journalist friend who I won't out in saying this, but he has a funny quote. He's like, you don't spend $130 million to tell the truth or something like that. He's very skeptical. And look, I don't know. I think Nolan's amazing. And I think the movie was incredible. But there are a lot of weird things around that case that, again, let's demarcate this, Kurt, as speculation. I'm not saying that Oppenheimer definitely was part of the research.
Yes.
But Gordon Gray, who was rumored to be part of the Majestic 12, was overseeing that kangaroo court that stripped him of his Q clearance. And so the Majestic 12, again, is this sort of this group of top brass in the military, high up scientists and strategists under Truman and then later under Eisenhower that basically would advise on kind of the UFO issue. And so Gordon Gray, he does form the Psychological Strategy Board. That's a historical fact under Eisenhower, is overseeing this sort of kangaroo court with Oppenheimer where his Q clearance gets stripped. And there are a lot of weird quotes from the transcripts. And one of the quotes is Oppenheimer says, a lot happened between 45 and 49. He keeps saying that. It's like a trope. And it's like, okay, what happened between 45 and 49? Well, the atom bomb was created between 41 and 45. And if anything, he got increasingly marginalized as the H-bomb was created, which was really Teller's thing. And so post-45, what are you talking about? What happened? And if you believe any of the lore, all of the UFO stuff happened between 45 and 49. So that's kind of interesting. John von Neumann has a very, I'm sure, intimately familiar with John von Neumann. Genius Hungarian physicist, created the mathematical foundations for quantum mechanics. And he's defending his friend Oppenheimer in this kangaroo court. And he says it took Robert Oppenheimer a while to get adjusted to the Buck Rogers universe that we're living in. What is he talking about? Buck Rogers was a comic strip at the time all about space travel and aliens and interplanetary colonization and time travel. And it's weird. And it begs this question, right? Like, you're super familiar with CERN. Like, what is CERN doing? It's higher and higher energy output to get to better ontological truth. And do we get unprecedented ontological truth with the unprecedented energy output that we had with the first atom bomb? I don't know. And I'm not claiming that that's for sure a thing. I do think it's a possibility. And then here's the very weird thing, Kurt. Edward Condon is also stripped of his Q clearance at the same time. Condon, who's known now publicly as this famous UFO detractor, he creates the Condon Commission later in 1966, is also stripped of his Q clearance in 53, 54 alongside his friend Robert Oppenheimer. They were very close. They studied under Max Born at Göttingen in Germany in the, must have been in the 20s. And he wrote the Los Alamos Primer. He helped set up Los Alamos. He's from Alamogordo. And he writes the Los Alamos Primer, which is basically a document that all employees at Los Alamos had to read. And then the nominal story is that Condon actually leaves Los Alamos because he clashes with General Leslie Groves, Matt Damon's character in Oppenheimer, because he thinks that Matt Damon is, there's too much secrecy. So that's the nominal story. And he goes on to actually work on civilian outreach nuclear programs, and he actually drafts the McMahon Act of 46, which is, again, becomes the Atomic Energy Commission, the Atomic Energy Act of 53, 54. So he's super instrumental in, I think, what becomes UFO secrecy. But then, so he's stripped of his clearance, doesn't have his clearance alongside Oppenheimer. And then in 66, a guy named Lou Branscombe, who's under Don Menzel at, who's like an early NSA guy, also rumored to be on the Majestic 12. And this is all in an interview that Condon is giving to the American Institute of Physics. So this is not crackpot stuff. Lou Branscombe goes to Condon and says, "Hey, I think you should get your clearance back." No reason why. And Lou Branscombe is on the Jason Advisory Board, as deep as it gets when it comes to American defense strategy. And Condon gets his clearance back, and all of a sudden he's running this independent commission, which we know now isn't independent because there are letters that have been revealed between him and Air Force Colonel Robert Hippler, where Robert Hippler is saying, I think you should show all past UFO research as a waste of money or whatever. And so he's doing this independent commission where he's not supposed to be coordinating with the Air Force, but he is coordinating with the Air Force. And it deals a death blow to UFO research, and it kind of kills Blue Book. And Blue Book ends at that point. And so I find it fascinating that maybe, there is a narrative that maybe Oppenheimer was stripped of his Q clearance because of the UFO thing. Condon, his buddy, is stripped of his Q clearance alongside Oppenheimer. He's then given his, and also they had stuff on Condon around Soviet, that maybe he was from Berkeley, and in his 20s and 30s he was kind of a pro-labor journalist, and they said he and his wife had Soviet sympathies or whatever. But I find it fascinating. They're both stripped of their clearance at the same time. Then he's randomly given his clearance back. He's put on this UFO commission, which is, I think, a total fake hit job, as history has proven, on the UFO subject. And in the background, here's the kicker, Kurt. The most read document on the FBI's website is something called the Hoddle Memo, which is about a UFO crash. And an Air Force officer finds the UFO with the crew intact, and it's insane. It's on the UFO. It's on the FBI website for everyone to see. And so this document could be fake, but it's on the website, and it's been FOIA'd or declassified, and it's there. Guy Hoddle is the guy. He's the guy who's being written to, and that's why it's called the Hoddle Memo. Guy Hoddle is creating a dossier of field reports on Edward Condon throughout his own kangaroo court, where they're stripping him of his clearance. So you have an FBI agent who's the head of the Washington field office for the FBI, and Guy Hoddle, who definitely knows about UFOs, unless this document is a total forgery, but it's on the FBI website, who is creating compromise, who's literally creating this big, has all these documents on Condon. And then Condon is given his security clearance back mysteriously in the 60s to basically do a hit job on UFOs. And so my question is, was he in the know all along because he's an atomic insider and he was clearly very close with Oppenheimer, and then his security clearance and its stripping and then retrieval was used as bait, essentially, to get him to do the Air Force and the FBI's bidding and kind of dismiss UFOs. And I think all of these are super open questions, worthy of investigation or falsification, if anybody can do that. But it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. When Oppenheimer said that, quote unquote, there was a lot that happened between 1945 and 1949, what was the context of that? Because it could also be that he's referring to himself. Like for myself, there's plenty that happened between 2010 and 2015. Sure. Grand Theft Auto was released. So that counts as a life event.
Great game.
GTA 5.
Great game. It's a really good question, and I'd love to read the original transcripts. The book is not the best written book. It's like 100 pages, and I'm picking out 4 of what I think are the most intriguing facts around the transcripts. It is interesting. I think Gordon Gray has the full transcripts of the Kangaroo Court in his archives, and he donated his archives to the Eisenhower Library. The one thing he asked to be kept out of the archives were the Oppenheimer Court transcripts. So I find that very interesting. So I think a follow-up from this conversation that you're now motivating me to do is like, we should go through all the original transcripts, read all this stuff in its proper context. Yeah. So I don't have a great answer to that.
When you're reading transcripts, books, or whatever it may be, how do you retain all that information? What is your process?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really stupid on something. Like when I hear you talk about physics, I'm like, I'm a chimp. I'm like not the same species as you. I think when it comes to memorizing like names and dates and stuff, I'm good with that. I don't know why, especially when they're very meaningful to me, like in terms of like fitting together a narrative of what's happening. I think.
Hey,
yeah.
Here's something you might want to know.
Yeah.
You know who also had a history degree, or at least started in history?
I know who you're gonna. I think I know who you're gonna say is Ed Witten.
Mm-hmm,
yeah. How crazy? See, that's crazy, right? Yeah, it's so interesting. And then
you know, when he was asked why, you know what he said?
What did he say?
He said, "Young people do stupid things." He said he doesn't know why. He said, "I have no good answer for that. It was just young people do stupid things."
That's hilarious. I think,
and then because he was also great in math when he was in high school, so it's not like he discovered he was great in physics and math when he was in his master's or late undergrad.
Totally. I think, was it Steven Weinberg read a recommendation for him, and he was like, "He's way smarter than me. Like, you should take him or something."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you know this story about von Neumann? I don't know if I told you this in person.
No.
About the fly between the cars?
No, please tell me. No.
Okay, so this is how much of a genius von Neumann is. So mathematicians say that the most brilliant mathematician maybe that ever was von Neumann. Yeah. So it goes Newton and then von Neumann. He was asked the question, okay, let's imagine you have two cars coming at one another at 10 miles per hour. So they're just driving slowly, coming at one another. The space between them is initially 100 miles. Okay? There's also a fly that starts at 1, say the one on the left, and it's a fast fly, so it can go like 50 miles per hour. So it speeds, it goes from this car, it reaches the next one, but the next one has moved a bit because they're both moving at 10 miles
that's
per hour.
Hard problem.
Hits it. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Hits it, turns around, comes back, hits it, and then so this fly is moving. And then it stops, and then because it gets killed between these two cars. The question is then, how far did the fly travel?
Oh, I'm not going to attempt to answer.
Yes, exactly. So there's a way of doing it with an infinite sum.
Okay.
So you could just add up a series, but you have to write down the formula. But the trick is that, okay, if these cars are coming at one another 10 miles per hour each, then it's as if one is stationary, the other's coming at it at 20 miles per hour. Okay, if there's 100 miles of a distance, then it takes it 5 hours to get from here to here. Okay, this fly moves at 50 kilometers per hour. 5 times 50 is 250 miles. Okay, so that's the easy way of doing it. The quote-unquote easy way is to realize there's a trick. Just reframe the problem. You don't have to worry about the fly's perspective. You just worry about how long does it take for them to crash, and then you multiply that by the fly's speed.
Right.
Okay, so this question was given to von Neumann. And then von Neumann just gives the answer almost instantaneously. It says 250 miles. And then they're like, oh, you know the trick. And then he's like, what trick? I just summed the infinite series.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Speaking of genius, a common rebuttal about UFOs is if there is such an advanced species, why do they crash? So explain, why do you think they crash, and why does it occur after 1945 more?
Yeah, totally. I think this is, again, demarcate this as speculation. I have no idea why they crash. But the possible interesting things people have said, so I guess the theories are, if you have nuclear blast, you have gamma radiation fallout, you have kind of an EMP effect. And so maybe that pops into whatever interdimensional space they're in and either messes with their flight path or sends a signal that they should sort of enter ours. I don't know if that's true. Another just interesting thing would be like they're sort of trying to protect their resources and monitoring nuclear stuff. And every time we detonate a nuke or we're about to detonate a nuke or things become aggressive, it's more like they're sending us a gift. That would be the Jacques Vallée theory. So maybe they'll send us like, and Rush sort of touched on this as well. Like they'll send us like a little like civil propulsion like where it's like, you guys didn't need to create nukes. You could have gone the civil propulsion route or whatever.
Yeah.
Like here's like a 0-point energy machine, like figure it out, So I think it is a very valid question. Like why would these things travel, from thousands of light years away and just crash? Like if they have that capability, they probably wouldn't crash. But I think a common trope of all, alien encounters of the first or third kind, whether you're seeing crafts or, we can believe it or not, interacting with any sort of beings, there's some sort of bizarre absurdity element. And that's where I do sort of like the Jacques Vallée idea that intermittent reinforcement, like behavioral reinforcement techniques are sort of used as a way to sort of nip at the herd. And like, so it's like, why are they abducting Betty and Barney Hill of all people, or Travis Walton? Like these people aren't like, it's not like the president of the US or like, it's not like the most important, but maybe there's some sort of ripple under, like a la like cellular automata or something. There's some sort of like ripple effect whereby like you're like a node and you transfer the information. You get it. So yeah. I don't know why they crash. But I think we're so limited. If we're speaking from the perspective of like an ant colony, like wondering why humans do certain things. We're just so epistemologically limited would be my sort of main counterpoint.
So do you want to hear my
what do you think?
Unsubstantiated conjecture?
Please.
Yeah. Okay, again, and this is just if I was to speculate completely. It could be the case that it's just the nature of these devices. So that they're so temperamental that it's a miracle. Like 49 out of 50 are supposed to crash. And it's a miracle that they only have 1 out of 100.
Yep.
Okay, so it could be that. And it also could be that they just don't care about them in the same way we fly drones into volcanoes.
Yep.
And so we're like, all right, well, whatever. They're so inexpensive. So it could be like that. It could also be that, well, something else that I don't agree with is when people say, if they have anti-gravity, then they're so much more advanced. I don't see that as being the case. So, for instance, it may be that it's an independent technology. So, for instance, it's conceivable one country could have developed the steam locomotive, whereas another developed superconductors.
Yep.
And then each would look at the other one and say, whoa, you're way more advanced than me. Advanced compared to what? It's not like it's a singular scale.
Totally. It's not linear. Yeah, it's like the LK99 stuff's probably BS. It's probably wrong. But like say that had, you figured out the Meissner
and
effect.
Look how
and it
close
came out
it was.
Look at how close it is. And say that came out of Korea. Like that would be some sort of super asymptotal. That would be like a stepwise leap. And yeah, it's not like you have to like build on some necessary bedrock.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, or let's imagine another culture has fiber optics and another one has sustainable agriculture.
Yep.
Like each one would look at the other and be like, oh, you're leagues ahead. If you enjoyed that clip, then the full podcast is out right now. You can click around here as well as subscribe to get notified. Enjoy.